We made decisions in the budget last year to increase taxes by £40 billion. I have absolutely no intention of repeating a budget on that scale again. That budget was absolutely necessary because the previous government left a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, not some year in the future, but in the fiscal year we're in. They had already spent the reserves set aside for genuine emergencies 3 times over just 3 months into the financial year. So I had to take immediate action, both to put our public finances on a firm footing and also to ensure that our public services that had been committed funding, but that money hadn't been made available, to make sure that they could continue to function. We will be increasing spending on police in the spending review next week, so that's not a decision that, or a choice that I would recommend.
I made the choice to means test the winter fuel payment so that it's only targeted at those most in need. I know that not everyone in this hall or in the country will agree with every decision that I make. But I will not duck those decisions. Not for political expediency, not for personal advantage. Faced with that £22 billion black hole that the Conservatives left this year, and with a triple lock ensuring that the state pension will rise by an estimated £1,700 over the course of this Parliament, I judged it the right decision in the circumstances that we inherited.
There's something oddly satisfying about watching a politician trip over their own policy decisions, especially when the stumble turns into a full-blown faceplant in Parliament. That's exactly what happened to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who tried to backtrack on her controversial winter fuel cuts and somehow pass it off as a masterstroke of economic strategy. But the real showstopper came when Helen Whately stepped up, not just to question the move, but to tear it apart in front of the entire chamber. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a political ambush. Reeves had slapped.
So I had to make decisions last year to restore sound public finances, and that involved a number of difficult decisions around welfare, taxation, and also public spending, including the decision to means test winter fuel payments, so only the poorest pensioners, those on pension credit, got it. But we have now put our public finances on a firmer footing. The economy is in a better shape, but we have also listened to the concerns that people had about the level of the means test. And so we will be making changes to that. They will be in place so that pensioners are paid this coming winter, and we'll announce the detail of that and the level of that as soon as we possibly can. But people should be in no doubt that the means test will increase and people will get, more people will get winter fuel payments.
Slashed winter fuel payments last year, affecting millions of pensioners. The justification then? Fiscal discipline. But now, without warning, she's bringing them back and trying to reframe the move as a sign of economic strength. That pivot raised more eyebrows than support. Whately seized the moment with surgical precision, calling out the sudden reversal and forcing Reeves to squirm under pressure. And with cameras rolling and MPs murmuring, the Chancellor's proud U-turn quickly turned into a public spectacle, one she clearly didn't see coming. Rachel Reeves's reversal on winter fuel payments wasn't just a quiet policy shift. It was a political earthquake, and everyone in Parliament felt the tremors. After months of insisting that slashing support was a tough but necessary choice, she suddenly rolled out a new plan promising fuel help for 9 million pensioners. The timing couldn't have been worse. Public trust was already fragile, and now she was offering up a U-turn without any admission of fault. To make matters worse, Reeves didn't simply reinstate.
I feel for the honourable gentleman sent here today by his bosses to complete what must be the most humiliating climb down a government has ever faced in its first year in office. Well, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, he has been sent to end that courageous last stand. And, unless it's coming next, he has been sent without the one thing that pensioners up and down the country deserve, an apology. Yeah. Let's be clear. The government made a choice to cut the winter fuel payment. It is outrageous to claim that the economy has somehow improved from the day they made the cut, and they know it. In fact, by almost every metric, the opposite is true. Inflation was at the 2% target. Now it's 1.5 points higher. 150,000 more people are unemployed. Growth forecasts have been slashed in half by the OBR. And in the meantime, they've gone to town with the country's credit card. Borrowing is up. Debt is up. Who is the Chancellor trying to fool when she says she can certainly afford this when before she couldn't? The fact is, last winter, she gave pensioners fuel money to the unions. Now she realises how unpopular that was. So she's pretending everything has changed. Perhaps the most surprising thing is she thinks anyone is taken in. 50,000 pensioners plunged into poverty this year, according to their own analysis. 100,000 extra pensioners ended up in A&E this winter. Their mistake has hurt people, and it is cowardly not to own up to it.
The payments. She framed the move as proof that Labour had strengthened the economy. It was the kind of spin that defies logic, like trying to take credit for rebuilding a house you helped tear down. The disconnect between the narrative and the lived reality was glaring, and Whately wasn't about to let that slide. By the time she stood up to speak, the air was already thick with tension. What followed wasn't just political critique, it was demolition. Helen Whately didn't come to grandstand. She came armed with receipts. And instead of getting lost in party slogans or cheap shots, she focused on something that doesn't lie. Numbers. One by one, she unpacked the government's economic record like a prosecutor laying out evidence in court. Inflation is still stubborn at 2.8%. Unemployment is creeping up, now at 4.5%. Government borrowing has ballooned to £148 billion, 17 billion more than last year. Growth forecasts have been slashed. That's not fiscal control. That's a warning light flashing red. What made it brutal was how calmly she delivered the takedown. No shouting, no theatre, just cold, undeniable facts that made Labour's economic claims look more like a fantasy than a fiscal plan. You could almost feel the oxygen leave the room, and all this while Reeves sat just metres away, trapped by a reality she couldn't spin. What turned Whately's attack into a knockout blow wasn't just her grasp.
A new mattress. Unwrap it, see how it feels, sleep on it for a while, but if it causes a political backache, send it back. This rushed reversal raises as many questions as it answers. It's clear that when the Prime Minister stood up and made his big U-turn announcement in PMQs, he had no plan and no idea how he was going to pay for it. It's a totally unfunded spending commitment. Where is the 1.25 billion needed to pay for this U-turn coming from? I note that the Minister has kicked that can down the road until the budget. They claim it won't permanently add to borrowing. So does this mean it will permanently add to taxation? And on the plan itself, is this really the best system of means testing they could come up with? Is he sure they have thought it through? Or is this going to unravel too? What happens if a pensioner earns over
economic data? It was her ability to connect those numbers to real people. She didn't let the debate stay trapped in spreadsheets and forecasts. She brought it home. To the pensioners, who spent last winter in freezing flats, to the families that watched their elders struggle, to the 50,000 pushed deeper into poverty due to reckless budgeting. She pointed to the ripple effect of bad policy. Over 100,000 extra A&E admissions, not due to a new virus or natural disaster, but because thousands couldn't afford to stay warm. That's not an accounting error, that's a humanitarian failure. Reeves tried to dress up the U-turn as recovery. Whately was laying out the damage already done. Her message was clear. These aren't just policy decisions, they're moral decisions. And the government got them badly wrong. What made Whately's critique cut so deep was that it didn't stop at the winter fuel U-turn. She framed it as part of a much bigger problem. A government that seems to be flying blind. Labour didn't just fumble one policy, they came into office without a clear roadmap, and it's starting to show. Instead of laying out well-developed plans during their time in opposition, they've been scrambling to fix their own messes in real time. Whately painted it as a government improvising on the job, rewriting policies after implementing them. The result? confusion, mixed signals, and mounting public frustration. Her argument wasn't just about mismanagement, it was about trust. If Labour's economic team can't stick to their own strategy for more than a few months, what
£35,000 a year through non-taxable income are they going to have to register for self-assessment and start filling out a tax return in their 80s or 90s? But if not, why should someone earning taxed income, you didn't, be disadvantaged? Is it fair that a millionaire pensioner and their spouse might receive a payment, but two people earning $36,000 won't? And what happens if someone dies in the period between receiving the payment and having to pay it back? Are they going to go after the deceased person's relatives? And two final questions, Madam Deputy Speaker. After all this, the savings for the Treasury this coming year may be as little as £50 million. Does he think it's worth it, and will he apologise?
Minister Bell.
exactly are they leading the country toward? It's the kind of uncertainty that rattles markets and voters. To really drive her point home, Whately didn't just focus on Labour's failings, she highlighted the contrast in approach. The Conservatives, she admitted, had also faced tough choices on winter fuel payments, but the difference was in how those decisions were handled, thoughtfully, cautiously, with a plan. She acknowledged that giving support to wealthy pensioners might not be ideal, but instead of ripping up the system overnight, her party aimed for reform, not chaos. That comparison stung because it made Labour's misstep look not only clumsy, but careless. Whately described Labour's decision-making like surgery with a sledgehammer, brutal, rushed, and bound to cause collateral damage. The end result? A policy mess and a public relations disaster, all while real people paid the price. And by framing this as a question of responsibility rather than ideology, she boxed Labour in. The issue wasn't left or right, it was about whether the government had the competence to manage the basics. When Labour won power, they sold themselves as the grown-ups in the room. The party that would sweep up the Conservative chaos, balance the books, and run things like seasoned professionals. But Whately exposed the hollowness of that promise with devastating clarity. Instead of cleaning up the mess, Labour has started creating their own. And they're doing it faster than anyone expected. The winter fuel fiasco isn't some minor misstep. It's a warning sign that their narrative of competence is collapsing under pressure. Whately likened it to hiring a professional cleaner, only to come home and find your house on fire. And that image stuck, because it captured the absurdity of the situation perfectly. The public...
This measure was so urgent that pensioners had to be left in the cold. So can the Chancellor confirm categorically that there will be no additional borrowing to pay for this chaotic reversal? And if this is the case, can she explain how on earth it can be paid for without raising taxes? And can the Right Honourable Lady explain why last summer, apparently to avoid a run on the pound, Mr. Speaker, this measure was so urgent that pensioners had to be left in the cold over the last winter? What exactly has changed? Because it certainly hasn't been made possible by an improvement in the economy or the public finances.
Expected stability. What they got was a Chancellor reversing course while pretending it was all part of the plan. The more Labour tries to polish the optics, the more glaring the cracks become. And Whately made sure every one of those cracks was visible. Whately didn't stop at Labour's recent decisions. She widened the lens and exposed a full economic dashboard glowing red. Unemployment is set to peak at 4.5% in 2025. Inflation is forecast to rise again, hitting 3.8% by July. The International Monetary Fund has even slashed the UK's growth outlook from 1.6% to just 1.1%. These aren't theoretical projections. They are the kind of figures that shake households, stall businesses, and rattle investor confidence. Yet Labour continues to claim they've got the economy under control, as though these statistics aren't staring them in the face. Naley framed it with devastating simplicity. You don't get to declare yourself a skilled sailor while your ship is clearly sinking. Whately's dismantling of Labour didn't rely on party slogans or tribal attacks. What made it land was her reliance on facts. Solid, uncomfortable, undeniable facts. She wasn't spinning an ideology. She was pointing to numbers and real-world consequences that everyone in the chamber could see. Inflation rising, growth stalling, pensioners suffering, hospitals overwhelmed. It was all there, and Labour had no credible answers. That's what made it sting. It wasn't a theatrical performance aimed at applause. It was a grounded, data-bagged indictment of failure. Even Labour backbenchers couldn't ignore it. Some have already started to break ranks, quietly campaigning against their own party's policies. That's not just a sign of internal disagreement, it's a signal of dysfunction. If your own MPs are distancing themselves from your decisions, something is seriously wrong. Whately's takedown wasn't just a win in Parliament. It was a warning shot for a government already wobbling under the weight of its own promises. What she delivered wasn't just a critique. It was a full-scale exposure of a government claiming to lead while clearly losing control. This winter fuel U-turn was supposed to be a reset. Instead, it's turned into a symbol of chaos, indecision, and a shaky grip on power. The kind of moment that lingers in public memory, especially for the millions who felt its consequences firsthand. And if this is Labour's version of competence, the country has every reason to be worried.